Right, Hegseth is just starting to speak. Let's cross over and listen live to him.
Request for the Department of War. The President's budget request reflects the urgency of the moment, addressing both the deferment of long-standing problems as well as positioning our forces for both the current and the future fight. We think divesting to invest is a strategy of austerity. I'm honored to appear alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as Jay Hurst, our Comptroller, or Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your partnership in securing the investments needed for a stronger, prouder, and more secure America. I think what our troops have demonstrated to the world over the last 15 months are a reflection of that. A nation's ability to build, innovate, and support the critical needs of its warfighters at speed and at scale is the foundation upon which its survival rests. However, upon taking office on January 20th, 2025, President Trump inherited a defense industrial base that had been hollowed out by years of America Last policies, resulting in a diminished ability to project strength. Under the previous administration, we were focused on offshoring and outsourcing, riddled with cost overruns and degraded capabilities. Under the leadership of President Trump, our builder-in-chief, we are reversing this systemic decay and putting our defense industrial base back on a wartime footing. If you ask anyone at our Pentagon, urgency informs everything we do. We're rebuilding a military that the American people can be proud of, one that instills nothing less than unrelenting fear in our adversaries and the utmost confidence in our allies. We fight to win in every scenario. The $1.5 trillion FY27 budget put forward by the President will build upon the historic $1 trillion FY26 top line and continue to reverse the 4 years of underinvestment and mismanagement of the Biden administration. The $1.5 trillion budget will ensure the United States continues to maintain the world's most powerful and capable military as we grapple with a complex threat environment across multiple theaters. Not to mention, this budget also includes a historic troop pay increase, 7% for lower enlisted, and the budget eliminates all poor or failing barracks. Quality of life for our troops is front and center in this budget as well. By supercharging our industrial capability and transforming how the department does business, we're restoring American commercial dominance at a pace unseen in generations, transforming the defense industrial base from a broken, slow-moving system of the past. We have flipped the Pentagon acquisition process from a bureaucratic model to a business model, 180, decisively moving from an acquisition environment paralyzed by bureaucratic red tape into an outcomes-driven organization focused on delivering the most at cost, at scale for taxpayer dollars. Over the past year, through historic multi-year procurement agreements, smart business deals for things like critical munitions and capabilities, we've sent an unambiguous demand signal to industry partners to build more and build faster. The result has been a surge, a revitalization of our great American factories and a massive reinvestment in the skilled American workers who serve as the industrial muscle behind our warriors. Let me briefly provide you with some concrete high-level metrics of what's been accomplished over just the past few months. These are announced new facilities and investments to support American warfighters, and I would refer you to the screen. The department has helped stimulate more than 250 private investment deals in 39 states, in 180 cities, and 150 companies worth more than $50 billion. It's resulted in 280 new or expanded facilities, more than 18 million new square feet of American manufacturing, and more than 70,000 new jobs in defense. This is the key part of this. These $50 billion of investment in new plants, new assembly lines, and new factories, these are private investments, not taxpayer dollars. By changing our departments, transforming our department's business model, American companies are investing in America with their own money, their own capital, a historic demonstration of American manufacturing and defense revitalization, all again with their capital, not Uncle Sam's. This has never been done before and is long overdue, from a bureaucratic model to a business model. Anyone on the outside looking in at what's been done inside this Pentagon in the last 12 months cannot deny the fundamental transformation at speed, at scale, to innovate and meet the threats of today and tomorrow. These investments equal great things for America, American families, and American workers, and help to ensure that our warfighters are able to defend the American dream and all American made. Together with the help of the policy updates and appropriations passed by Congress, President Trump's War Department has begun to turn the lights back on in manufacturing towns across this country, and once again, forging a lethal arsenal of freedom. Where critical supply chains are threatened, the War Department has acted decisively to inject capital, stimulate production, and prevent adversarial exploitation. We are firing up the American economic engine, and at every level of our defense industrial base. Every policy we pursue, every budgetary item we request serves to ensure that the department remains laser-focused on increasing lethality and survivability of our forces from the front lines to the factory floors. This is a historic budget, as you said, Mr. Chairman. This is a fiscally responsible budget. This is a warfighting budget. And speaking of warfighting, the topic of Iran, I'm sure will come up today, which I very much welcome discussing. I look forward to sharing the incredible successes of our military, achieved in a matter of weeks. President Trump, unlike other presidents, has had the courage to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and he's ironclad in that. We have the best negotiator in the world driving that deal. The biggest challenge, the biggest adversary we face at this point are the reckless, feckless, and defeatist words of congressional Democrats and some Republicans 2 months in, I remind you, 2 months in to a conflict. Lest I remind you, and my generation understands how long we were in Iraq, how long we were in Afghanistan, how long we were in Vietnam. 2 months in on an existential fight for the safety of the American people, Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. We are proud of this undertaking. I am proud that President Trump has had the courage to do it, and I look forward to sharing more about what our troops have accomplished. So I thank you again for the opportunity to address this committee. I ask that God would continue to watch over our troops in harm's way, and those that have fallen are always in our memory, and we fight to ensure their legacy. Look forward to answering the questions of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Kane, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and members of this committee. Thanks for having me today. I'm honored to be here today alongside the Honorable Pete Hegseth and Honorable Jay Hurst to testify on the President's fiscal year 2027 budget. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm thankful for your continued partnership in support of our warfighters defending the homeland and our interests around the world. It's a privilege to speak with you today about the foundation of America's strength, our 2.8 million members of our joint force. And I'm continually inspired by our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen, and our civilians standing the watch for our nation, supported always by their families. Each and every one of them could have chosen another path, but they don't. They choose to serve and to do something more important than themselves. And every day they meet the nation's challenges, from combat operations to critical support roles, with the courage, tenacity, and grit that keeps our nation strong and secure. I would also like to express my deep gratitude for the 39 members of our joint force who've passed away during my time as the chairman, including 14 who've passed during Operation Epic Fury. As the Secretary said, we are deeply grateful for each of them and their families, and their names will never be forgotten. As the chairman, my duty is to ensure our civilian leadership has a comprehensive range of military options and the associated risks that to those leaders who make the nation's hardest decisions and offer my military advice privately. I owe the President, the Secretary, and the Congress the truth at every turn. My blueprint for this role is General George C. Marshall. His commitment to civilian control of the military and nonpartisan military remains a constant standard and something I borrow from often. I strive daily to emulate his candor, delivering the facts to our leaders and telling them always what they need to hear, not always what they want to hear. And once a decision is made, executing it with absolute dedication, and that is the demand of our profession. I sit here today before you representing our incredible joint force, and I want to emphasize my commitment to this committee and the Congress that I will always follow General Marshall's steadfast example by providing clear and candid nonpartisan military advice and working together with our civilian leaders to ensure that our military does the things that we must do, being prepared to deter and defend our nation and, if called upon, win our wars around the world. America's joint force is operational at its core, purpose-built for the realities of a complex and ever-changing world. We are organized, trained, and equipped to execute the most demanding missions across the globe with unrivaled precision. Over the past year, our warfighters have consistently demonstrated exactly what it means to be the most capable, adaptable, and most professional military force in the world. Our shared goals are to ensure the joint force maintains the strategic initiative and advantage, projecting American power and responding to global challenges on our nation's terms. During Operations Rough Rider, Midnight Hammer, Southern Spear, Absolute Resolve, and Epic Fury, the Joint Force executed globally integrated operations and missions alongside our interagency and international partners. And once our civilian leaders made a decision, we make those missions our own, demonstrating the unmatched capability to seamlessly synchronize our capabilities across all domains, from the seabed to cislunar space and higher. We're able to accomplish these complicated missions and work because we draw from a deep, enduring reservoir of training, professionalism, and commitment. Our operational tempo is high, but we're designed to sustain and rebuild our strength continuously. We build readiness every day. We train professionals every day. We learn and sharpen our edges every day by being learning leaders. And I am incredibly proud to be a member of this Joint Force team, proud of the team, and proud of the commanders. As the chairman and the ranking member both said, we live in complex and dynamic times where global risk is scaling. The complexity of today's modern battlefields demands our constant adaptation, innovation, and partnership with this Congress. As a joint force, we're up to the challenge. We're built for this environment. However, continued success is not guaranteed by past achievements. It must be secured through forward-looking partnerships with Congress. And to drive this pace and change and maintain our superiority, we need timely, predictable, and sustained investment. The resources we discussed today are critical to modernizing our force and ensuring that whatever threats emerge in the future, that your joint force is ready to meet those challenges to protect our interests and defend our nation. As the Secretary said, the President's fiscal year 2027 budget supports the Department's goals of recharging the defense industrial base and the national industrial base, ensuring our military is ready, securing our military advantage. Within the joint force, the uniform side, our priorities remain the same, ensuring our warfighters are properly armed, globally integrated, and ready, while always taking care of our people. And what truly sets our people apart from other militaries around the world is the 1.8 million members, enlisted members of our force, who maintain readiness beyond reproach and are the envy of every other nation. I'm joined today by the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, Dave Isom, who's here with me today representing the 1.8 million members of the enlisted force. He is a great American, not an Americant. While we face dynamic and a dangerous world, I have the absolute trust in the extraordinary men and women who come and volunteer to serve our nation within our joint force. They execute the missions quietly every day, and coupled with the American spirit, outthink, outcompete, and relentlessly innovate, we will maintain our decisive edge, but doing so requires your partnership. We stand ready today to answer our nation's call. It remains the honor of a lifetime for me to serve alongside the members of this joint force. And as we sit here today in this important hearing, I ask us all to remember our deployed teammates who are out there right now doing our nation's business. And may we again always remember our fallen who've given us the gift of an incredible example, and their family members who continue to show us what courage and grit look like. Thank you again for your enduring support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. I recognize myself now for questions. Secretary Hegseth, thank you for undertaking the Arsenal of Freedom tour and the great work the department's doing to help enhance our capacity in our defense industrial base. Could you tell us how last year's reconciliation bill helped enable what you have been able to do, and what you think this year's FY27 budget request will do on that front?
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership and your support on that topic. I mean, coming into this position, we fell in on a lot of the reforms you and this committee have been advocating for a long time. Looking for somebody that was willing to run with them, and our department have run with those. And that reconciliation bill last year was kind of the rocket fuel to initiate President Trump's priorities in this department. So we fell in on a department that was focused on a lot of the wrong things, going in the wrong direction. And with reconciliation, we were able to put $22 billion in shipbuilding, $22 billion into Golden Dome, $25 billion into munitions, established drone dominance, which we're continuing to do this day in this next budget funds. So getting in front of that budget cycle, which had been notoriously unpredictable, coming out of the continuing resolution of FY25, to fund this and then a historic bill in FY26, laid the groundwork for this historic budget to ensure that we're not coming at a cold start here. We came into this administration. Reconciliation was a beautiful tool. We were able to use that through that one big beautiful bill to fund the priorities of this department. We spent on $4 billion on barracks, started immediately getting after the quality of life of barracks. Because of the austerity of the Biden administration, we traded off of maintenance, traded off of quality of life to try to fund other things operationally. This budget stops that cycle and both invests in sustainment and modernization, which is something that's critically important. So without that reconciliation bill, I think, Mr. Chairman, we'd be in a very different place. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, as you are aware, the expansion of the defense industrial base is the principal focus of this year's NDAA. So in addition to enacting this budget request that's been submitted, we want to work with you to enhance the department's statutory authorities to improve the capacity of our DIB. What additional changes in law, such as the additional multi-year block buy authority, would you recommend that we pursue in this year's NDAA?
A few aspects of the acquisition transformation that's been undertaken by Undersecretary Duffy in acquisitions and sustainment. So there's some aspects of that we'd like to codify even more. But you mentioned it, multi-year procurement is incredibly important and one of the most important parts of this bill. When this committee and this Congress funds those things, companies are already breaking ground on tens of billions of dollars of new plants. You name we've got 14 in our ammunition council that we're focusing on certain ammunitions. There are 14 that are critical. PAC-3s, SM-3s, SM-6s, THAADs, Patriots, Tomahawks, AMRAAMs, JASSMs, you name PRISMs, you name them. We were building them at too slow and too low a level. Now the companies are going to pay for those factories and those production lines. And when Congress gives those 5 to 7 year demand signals, they'll then fund it, not just, hey, can we get 10 more per month, but can we 2x, 3x, 4x the production, pay for it now, and the companies invest accordingly. So it's been a critical aspect of some of what we've done so far, but we need more of those 5 to 7 year investments.
Great. General Kane, what does the $1.5 trillion budget mean for the warfighter and our ability to project forces and secure our interests around the globe?
Chairman, you know, in my view, this represents a historic down payment on future security. If the budget is approved and ultimately deployed, as we look at the character of warfare changing very, very fast, what's layered in to this budget by our civilian leaders will allow us to start getting ahead of where technology is evolving. And as I mentioned, the character of warfighting is changing pretty quickly. Mass, simultaneity, autonomy, undersea, space, cyber, information, all of those ways that are now manifesting themselves on the battlefields around the world require a higher end of capital investment, and that's why we're grateful for the opportunity to have this budget make its way to the joint force. So it's an important down payment on the future here, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With that, I yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst, drag you into the conversation here. We have not yet received from the Pentagon the costs of the war. So just for the record, we'd like to get that as soon as possible. Certainly the munitions expended, but also underreported is we've had a fair amount of equipment destroyed, including 2 C-130s with the rescue of our downed airmen. So do you have either A, a cost estimate coming to us anytime soon, or B, a specific supplemental request?
Thank you for that question. So approximately at this day, we're spending about $25 billion on Operation Epic Fury. Most of that is in munitions. There's part of that is obviously O&M and equipment replacement. We will formulate a supplemental through the White House that will come to Congress once we have a full assessment of the cost of the conflict.
Sure. So you're saying the full cost at this point is $25 billion?
Yeah, that's our estimate for the cost.
Okay. Interesting, because I'm glad you answered that question, because we've been asking for a hell of a long time and no one's given us the number. So if you could get those details over to us, that would be great. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the nuclear aspect of Iran and the war. And it is worth noting that every president prior to this one, including President Trump in his first term, also prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without actually having to go to war in Iran. So we need to keep that in mind. But also, since the war started, Iran's nuclear arsenal has not been weakened in any way. And at the moment, in negotiations, what Iran is saying, basically pay us to open up the strait. That's their position, which is completely untenable. I agree. It's worth noting, of course, that the strait was open before the war started. Now we're negotiating to get back to status quo. And Iran's most recent offer is to say, we'll talk about nukes later. So what is the plan to actually turn all of this lethal kinetic action into an improvement in the nuclear situation? Because we haven't gotten there yet. Play it out for us. How does that happen? How does it actually lead to that result?
Well, I would take issue with the premise of the question that nothing was done. Operation Midnight Hammer was a very effective.
Well, I didn't say nothing was done. I said in this war.
Ultimately,
this war started.
well, this under this administration, unlike other administrations, which cut bad deals and pallets of cash with no ability to oversee whether Iran is actually pursuing a nuclear program.
Which is where
we
we're
want
at.
to litigate JCPOA or the Iran deal. Our view, the president's view, is that was a very bad deal.
Okay.
That gave them a
That's
bunch
the
of money up
past.
front.
What's the future?
To fund, you talked about negotiated deals. Allowed them to fund their proxies and spread Hamas and Hezbollah all around the region, build up nuclear capabilities.
Great. What are we going to do now?
President Trump has been clear-eyed, from the killing of Qasem Soleimani to the pulling out of the Iran deal to Midnight Hammer and now to this effort to recognize that you have to stare down this kind of enemy who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that
So they
never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the.
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
Reclaiming
might
my
be.
time for
we're
just a
watching
quick
it.
second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of
So
missiles.
Operation Midnight
They're at the
Hammer
weakest
accomplished
moment.
nothing of substance. It
You're
left us
missing-
at
you're
exactly
missing
the
the
same
point.
place we were before. So much so
their
that we had to
facilities
start
were
a
bombed
war.
and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
All right,
of
let me
missiles.
try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them, so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
And yet
to
they
ensure their
still haven't given
conventional
up the nuclear.
shield was
All right.
brought
One
to
other
heel, which
question,
we've done.
if I could get to it. So on Ukraine, a year plus ago, your advice, the president's advice, was Ukraine had no cards to play. They should go cut the best possible deal they could. Clearly, that was wrong. What did you miss? What did you miss about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you didn't see that Ukraine was going to be capable of doing what they've done in the last 14 months?
What we didn't miss, and we're here in this committee, is that Joe Biden, with no accountability, gave hundreds of billions of dollars of our weapons to Ukraine, to an outcome that never
you're
would
not
have
gonna
happened if President
gonna
Trump was
answer the
president.
question.
So he pulled out our. You guys don't talk about that. Ultimately, President Trump believes there should be
Okay.
a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine that serves
But you
the best
didn't
interests
expect
of both
Ukraine to be
parties.
where they're at right now. I'm asking you, just from a strategic
Listen,
standpoint, what
I
did
think the
you miss?
Ukrainians have shown great courage, and I appreciate that Europe is now paying for any weapons that we provide.
All right, I yield back. Thank you.
All right, now I want to remind everybody,
All right, we are going to dip out of that live discussion there at the House Armed Services Committee. Pete Hegseth there being asked about the $1.5 trillion defense budget request that the Trump administration is making there, and something of a grilling there from the ranking Democrat. Listening to that with me, Doug Herbert. Doug, what did you make of what we heard there?
What's interesting here is we're calling this a hearing. There's actually two parallel hearings going on. There's a hearing on the overall defense budget, right, which is this whopping, the biggest in American history, request for a $1.5 trillion budget for the next year, which would be, as we were saying, almost half a trillion dollars, almost $500 billion increase, which is almost a 50% increase over last year. So there's that. And that is the ostensible reason that Hegseth and the Joint Chiefs of Staff head, Dan Kane, sitting next to him, are appearing before this joint session of both the Armed Services Committee, of both senators and representatives, and the Appropriations Committee. But within it, you have Hegseth himself taking a lot of fire on the Iran strategy, because the Iran war is here and now, right? This is not some abstract defense procurement for the future. This is money being spent now. As we said earlier, they were burning through over $11 billion in the first day of war, that according to the Pentagon's own estimates given to lawmakers. The question now is, they're sort of extrapolating, asking Hegseth essentially, what exactly have you achieved to date after burning through all of these billions of dollars of in this war against Iran, now in an apparent stalemate where Iran continues effectively, as you heard the Democratic lawmakers saying, effectively still is able to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. What has been achieved? What is the strategy here? And he's trying to understand. He's actually taking, it's going to the jugular with Hegseth, because what he's essentially saying is we're basically back to where we were well before this war started, in a worse position, though. The strait is closed. It was open before the war. And the nuclear deterrent that Donald Trump has said is, his biggest objective, making sure Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Well, where is that happening? Because the lawmakers are basically saying that supposedly Donald Trump proclaimed those nuclear weapons destroyed, obliterated during the 12-day joint campaign with Israel last June. What happened to that? The nuclear weapons are still apparently there. So they're insinuating, the insinuation from the minority party on these committees is that you've actually achieved nothing so far, despite spending all these billions of dollars. And you're asking for us, on top of that, another at least $100 billion in supplemental spendings just for this war. So then you extend that and you're saying you want us to give you hundreds, tens of billions of dollars, but probably at least $100 billion more to fund the Iran war. And on top of that, you're asking us for almost $500 billion extra in the fiscal defense procurement budget for next year. What's that about? And they're not really, there's a sense from just the easy takeaways, that they're not getting straight answers. You know, there was one democracy public service democracy group called Public Citizen. It basically stated that this budget request, $1.5 trillion for the fiscal year, is beyond the wildest dreams of the military-industrial complex, right? This is the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower famously warned about, beware of. He's saying that even, there have been reports recently in the U.S. News outlets that even Trump's aides, some of his senior aides, have been struggling to figure out how are they going to spend $500 billion extra dollars in the budget? It's a whopping number, and even within the Trump's administration, the chief budget aide reportedly in the White House having trouble actually trying to put some meat behind those requests. So they're trying to get a handle on what is the biggest procurement request in history, and they're trying to extract some sort of coherent answers from a man who, as the Democrats see it, and not the Republicans for the most part, but as the Democrats see it, has essentially stonewalled Congress by not being forthcoming in the fact that the strategy as they see it has not panned out, that they did not, that is they being the Trump administration, and notably Pete Hegseth, or Dan Kane, did not anticipate the resistance, the resilience that we would be in this place today. Pete Hegseth said at one point, we're only 2 months into this war, and yet let's remember the original timeline. Donald Trump was thinking this was going to be a relatively quick war, and there were suggestions at the very beginning it could be over within days, and then that was sort of extended to weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. We are well past that benchmark, and the new normal, the new narrative out of the Trump administration is that we are only in the baby stages, the baby steps of what could be a long war, and the message is essentially hunker down, and yes, we're going to need money to wage wars. Pete Hegseth has been very explicit about this. He says killing bad guys costs a lot of money. So you can't say that they've been beating around the bush in their objectives, but there's a sense on these committees that the clash that was being expected is playing out right now on the floor of the Congress there, because they're not getting answers from the Trump administration. At the same time, the Trump administration is seeking an extremely big, a whopping budget procurement. I will just note and leave you with this thought. We talk about $1.5 trillion budget request. It's really going to be almost $5 trillion, about $4.5 trillion in Donald Trump's proposal over the next decade, over the next 10 years. And that is where the real fears are rising, and hence the very hard-edged questioning from especially the Democratic members, the minority members of these committees on how do you justify spending at a time where social spending is really under crunch in America, where Americans are feeling the economic pain, Americans are crying out for more, not less social spending. How do you reconcile the two? They're not saying you don't need to have a strong military, but what they are insinuating is that this request is simply way out of proportion with the reality of America's economy today.
All right, thank you for your analysis, Douglas Herbert, for us there.